Hello, my name is Ian Yems and welcome to this video where we shall be considering key aspects around October monitoring. So the purpose of this session is to support post-16 leaders, so whether you're head of sixth form or deputy head or assistant principal, curriculum manager, faculty leader, whatever your title is, it's really about what are the key considerations at this point in the academic year and how ALPS Connect Interactive can help you set that agenda. And really what we're focusing on is questions to be thinking about now and setting your action points for the next 6 weeks. There's lots of information to support your work using ALPS. There's a champions page in our knowledge base, both these accessible from the Connect homepage. I'm going to work through some example data with you, but I will be looking at the data itself rather than trying to train you on all the details of using Connect Interactive. But hopefully you'll be able to pick up some bits, and you can always pause the video or rewind if you wish to go back. So just a little bit of housekeeping to start off with then. Obviously it is a recorded video, so you can't ask us any questions, but do email us if you've got any technical questions. Then there is a support team as well. Plus we are running a number of live webinars as well, which you may wish to sign up for. So why are we doing this particular video? I think it's really important that across our school or college that the staff and the students see a common goal. And I think explaining that to everybody from the beginning is really important. So many schools and colleges will invest quite a lot of time in monitoring students and coming up with predicted grades or current working out grades. So being clear why we're doing this and being clear the definition of the grade. So in some circumstances, a school or college may choose to take an assessment grade. It might be a mock or it may be from a piece of work. So you may have decided with your year 13 students that you wanted to do some sort of formal assessment during this autumn term as a way of gauging where students are at and identifying any issues around lost learning for different individuals during the lockdown period. Other schools have decided not to do that, but have asked staff, having taught the students on and off, albeit in some cases for a few weeks now, is to begin to think about reassessing what their predicted grades for those students are. But this whole process of collating grades and having sort of interviews with students, it has to be clear to all staff and students why we're doing it and what the benefits are for them as individuals, so that we've got complete buy-in to the time that we're investing into collecting this data. Otherwise, the data that you put into SIMS or your MIS or then gets transferred into Connect Interactive, if the data itself is not robust and is not got, and you're not confident of the definition of behind that grade, then things will very quickly begin to fall apart. Just a quick reminder about ALPS terminology. If you're new to ALPS, you just visualize the thermometer. So red is red hot teaching and learning. That's fantastic. If your scores are in the red, that means you're in the top 25%. Black means that you're average, and blue means that you're in the bottom quartile compared to the national data. And remember, the benchmarks are using DFE national data. At Key Stage 5, if you're thinking about the L3VA, the government performance measures in England, then a 0 is about average. So an ALPS grade 5 means that your students have made average progress. So I'm going to dive straight into Connect Interactive now. So what we can see here then is the home page, and I'm going to spend most of my time in this subject analysis area. So what we can see here then is 4 data points, and these are for last year's students leading up to the centre assessed grades. So at the beginning of the year last year, for the year 13 that have left, we had an October monitoring point, then we had some mocks in January, then we had some teacher predicted grades in end of February, just before lockdown going into March, and then obviously the centre assessed grades that you all spent so long agonising over, wanting to make sure that you weren't over-egging your students, and then some of us will have regretted some of those decisions when they end up being the final grades. But that's history. We need to sort of be moving on and focus on our current students. What this does enable me to do is to begin to get a bit of feel for how departments have been monitoring. And if we just look at biology, for example, we can see here that the monitoring 2 points that the teacher predicted grades were grade 3. When they did their mocks in January time, it was a 5. And the centre assessed grades are actually a bit lower than this monitoring. So the SLT at the time decided that the first round of centre assessed grades that were submitted needed to be brought down a little bit, and certainly compared to monitoring point 2. The same is true of chemistry, where although it's still a grade 3, we can see from 0.96 it's gone down to 0.91. So we all spent quite a lot of time making sure that these grades here reflected our previous provision. And if I just flick over onto this tab, you can see here that we've got our actual results. So for biology, you can see that there have been sort of grades 5s and 4s. And so to jump up to a high grade 3 was probably a bit unrealistic, and that was why it was brought down. Chemistry, we can see here, as on an improvement journey, did much better in the CAGs than they did there. So that was one we sort of got away with a little bit. So I think really it's about you as an individual within your leadership role, within your school or college, really understanding your data. And one of the things that I've always loved about ALPS is this ability to be able to mix and match between results data, in-year data, and being able to look at some of those trends as we go through. So I've also got set up, this is now my current students, this is my current year 13. So this was an MPZ, so this was set up on the 1st of September based on my current students. So if I went into a class, if I go into biology, then what I'm seeing here are these are the students that are now being taught in their correct teaching sets. And the grade here is the most recent grade that we've got available. So in normal terms, that would be an end of year 12 assessment. Before they've gone off, it would have been ASs in the past, or ASs if you're still doing it. For us, that MPZ grade is based on the latest data, which would have been sometime around sort of February, March time. We've then, as our year 13 have come back, we've had a few weeks of teaching. It's been a bit disrupted. It's been quite anxious for many students, getting them settled in, trying to sort of pick up from, how much learning has been lost. And it's varied from student to student, depending on home circumstances. It's varied from subject to subject. So in this example, sort of training data here, we've got an assessed data column here. So this is the current working at. So this is based on an assessment. And then what we asked staff to do was to then come up with a predicted grade, was to use that assessment, use their knowledge of the youngsters as they would teach them during lockdown and how much contact they got with those individual students, and to realistically come up with a predicted grade. And you'll see that in some cases the predicted grade is a bit lower than the assessment, and there's questions that we would need to ask as a leader around how some of these predictions have been arrived at, and we will see that some of them are greater. So the key part for us as leaders is about asking the right questions and ensuring that we're confident of the data that is being provided to us. Now, if we have a look down here at sociology, what I've done here is I've set up the current monitoring, not against the 2020 results, which were the CAGs, but I've just gone back a year, just so I get a bit more of a feel of it when the students are actually examined. And we can see here that sociology is a grade 3. And if I go back to my results and I look at it across the last few years, they've had some phenomenal results as a department. And yet when we look at their monitoring data, here we can see that they've been very pessimistic until we got to the synthesis grades, where suddenly there was a large jump. But that score there is much more reflective to what their results are like, as we can see here. And when we look at the current data, then again we can see that they're back to their old ways of being quite pessimistic. So there's a conversation there to be had with that department around their methodology for their assessments and their predicted. And I think it's about us being consistent as a leader within the post-16 provision. If we've got a department that's constantly under-predicting, then in our heads we're beginning to add data onto that and uplift it in our own minds. And that isn't really sensible. Really what we want to be doing is be able to work with those departments so that there's much more consistency across the piece. If we have a look at chemistry in a bit more detail here, okay, so they're monitoring grades were a 4, and then their predictions were 3. And if I go back to previous years for chemistry, we can see that there was a 3, and a 3. So they were over predicting there. When we got their actual results for chemistry, we can see that they were sort of 4. So we really want to be looking at how they've arrived at these grades. The assessment there is a 4, which is sort of more realistic in terms of their results. But then having that discussion about why they think they're a 3 and what's the reasons behind it. So it may well be that we've got a new member of staff. It may be that we've had a change of specification. There's a whole host of reasons behind that. But that's our job as the head of 6th or as the faculty leaders to begin to unpick these sorts of questions with staff. Now, if we look at this last set of data here, this is showing me therefore the results and the current predictions. So if we think about where we are now at this current moment in time, we've done an assessment. So we've got our current working at grades, and then we've asked teachers to predict where they think they're likely to be at the end of the year. And so I was just going to focus on this current set of data here, this predicted data. So if I go into psychology, so psychology in terms of their results were a grade 3, a grade 4 and a grade 5. They're now currently predicting a grade 4. So things were going well. It dipped a little bit, and what they're saying is now that they're back to where they were a bit earlier. If we look at the gender split, there isn't much difference between them, and we can see here that the disadvantaged are doing slightly better than the non-disadvantaged. And what it's worth doing then is focusing on the teaching sets. Now we can see from this data that both sets are taught by the same member of staff. Not all schools populate the teacher column. If you don't, then I wouldn't worry about it. It just depends on how open you want to be with your data. But certainly your teaching set analysis is really important. So if we go in and we look at this set that's coming out as currently as a grade 6 as opposed to a grade 3, when you look at this view then, because the teaching set notation will be different across the years, that's why it's only showing it on this end column. But we can see here there is a stark difference here between the boys and the girls, and the disadvantage and the non-disadvantage. So again, it's a disadvantage that are doing slightly better. So when we're thinking about what can we do with this group of students, it may well be that the boys that we need to focus on. And so when we look at the students tab here, we can sort by prior attainment if we wish. Oh, okay, don't any other way. And we can look at, we've got the gender columns here, and be thinking about it's the boys that we really need to be working on. Where are the deficiencies? So if I look down here, these are predictions. So remember, you can put fine grades in. So a B plus means it's a high B. So the minimum expected grade in ALPS terms, based on the average GCSE score, is a B. The teacher felt that the student actually could be aiming for an A, and so set them a higher personalised target. And what they're saying there is they're not far off of that. So if I wanted to move this department between now and our next assessment point that may well be in January, I can just lift up that thermometer, and I can see 2 students will need to improve to meet a grade 5. Or if I wanted to get up to a grade 4, then it will need 8 students. So you have to think about what is realistic as a target, and it may be that you decide that let's just get to a grade 4 to start with. So I can turn on the what if. So this would be a conversation that I would have had with the head of psychology prior to this point, where the expectation was that they will produce a set of predicted grades that will be imported into whatever your management information system is. And then that gets transferred into ALPS. And as soon as that information is in Connect, then we'd be expecting the heads of departments and the teachers to go into this and look and say, okay, right, well, currently I'm a 6, it's not really where I want to be with this particular teaching set, and start to look at some of the students and think, well, maybe I was a bit pessimistic with that student, and maybe if I can get them to a C, I said they were a high D, if I can get them to a C, what would be the impact? Similarly here, I've got a student who, according to the most recent work, they lost quite a lot of time and working habits during lockdown. I'd said a high C, again, maybe that was a bit harsh, maybe that's a B. And you can begin to see how you can sort of build up. Now, you know your students, and what's really important is that we focus on the students themselves, but we can certainly start to model how that might look if these are the students that I'm going to focus on between now and next January. I can save that and come back to it. If I want to look at an individual, then I can see what the personalised targets are in their other subjects. I can see what their other subjects are predicting. If I was looking at this view where it was all monitoring data, then we would see that trend across there. Like if they've took their GCSEs with us and we were doing ALPS at Key Stage 4, and I would also see their background data there as well. So if I go back to subjects, at this point now is really as a leader is thinking about the different messages for each of the individual departments. So we've begun to see a bit of a trend in that we know that sociology is generally under-predicting. We know that chemistry are over-predicting possibly. So what would be the questions to ask those? Sociology actually get fantastic results. So we need to be trying to glean from them what it is that they're doing to get those results, at the same time as trying to address some of their quality of their predictions. I mean, maths were on an improvement journey. So what we've sort of seen here was a 5, a slight dip there, back to a 5 there. But our current predictions are taking us sort of back down into this territory. So again, I want to be having conversations with those around what are their strategies for improvement. English literature is another area for concern. If we go back and look at the CAGs, we actually submitted a set of English literature results that put them into the blue because we felt that was realistic when we lined that up with their previous results. Now, in hindsight, we all know now that the centre assessed grades were what counted. We may well have done that differently in hindsight, but clearly at the time we were trying to be honest and focus on those. I've not spent much time looking at the BTEC. I mean, essentially in this data, the BTEC predictions has been fairly accurate, and certainly we've seen that when we've been working with a number of schools and colleges that the grades that the BTEC subjects ended up with, and obviously there was some work that Pearson redid over the summer, were far more aligned with their results than perhaps some of the A-levels were. One of the other things to think about, and if I come back to our current students, is to look at the profile of the youngsters. So one of the features within ALPS is this high, middle and low. Just while I'm here, this set of categories here are ALPS defined, and these two at the bottom here are defined by the school. So you can see here that staff are asked to rate students and put them into 3 categories of how well they engage with their home learning during lockdown. So I could apply that comparison. New to 6th, the school was quite interested in students who have come up through year 11 and those who have come from other schools, and it's just split those external students by those who travel a long distance, and those are much more local. But if we have a look at the high, middle and low, so here you can see the high, middle and low on the left hand side, and if I scroll down then you see that the various categories here. But what we can do is to put this together into one table And there's one thing just to watch out. It puts these headings in alphabetical at the moment, so hopefully we'll be able to do something to swap this around. So when you come to do this yourselves, you may see them back in a more sensible order. But for the moment then, what we're seeing here is these are the high students, and these are students, and that means in the top 4 bands. These are the students in the bottom 4 bands, and these are the students in the middle 3 bands. If you're not quite sure on the band definition, you can go down to the help down here, and if you just type in, you can see I've done it before, high, and then just click search, then you do get an article. That's obviously a little bit tricky to read, small down there, so if you do that it will pop up into a new tab. There's a few videos and a bit of explanation, but here you can see there's a definition of the bands. So coming back to where we were, I'll just make that small again. What we can begin to do is look at the subjects, and we can see just at a glance that there's much more red here in the lower than there is in the high. So in other words, our students are making much better progress in the lower 4 bands than they are in the top 4 bands, and the middle is somewhere in the middle. It's also interesting to see, as you might expect in further maths, that those 4 students there, and then there's 2 in the middle, and then there's none in the bottom bands. But it's quite interesting to see which subjects have larger numbers in the lower bands, and which ones have got very low numbers or none at all. So what is also interesting then is to see what this looks like in the strategic section. I can look at that analysis by going into strategic and look at the same sort of thing here. So if I click on the A level and in here, I can, if I wish, apply any of these filters that we've got set up, high, middle, low, within that. But if I go into if I don't do that and just go straight into the report, what we're seeing here then is our strategic overview. So here's our last 3 years worth of results. Remember I left out the 2020, and there's the current students. So we can look at the profile, and we can see there's quite a big jump in the percentage of students that are in the top 4 bands. So we can see that we've got more students in the top 4 bands, and yet when we look at the banded by prior attainment, it's really stark here, where we're seeing that we've got poor progress for those students in the top few bands, and we're currently predicting the same. So as a school, I'd have been asking the questions before we got to this point about how can we stretch these students and make sure that they're achieving in those subjects that they're taking in those bands, and I would hope to be addressing that much more with our current students and those current predictions. So if I just come back to the PowerPoint, at every monitoring point, I think there's 3 simple questions, and that is to ask the heads of departments, the classroom teachers, what is their ALP score as a result of their predicted grades, and how do they feel about those results? Are they positive? How do they stay there? How are they going to improve? Do they need to split them down in particular groups of students, disadvantaged gender, or any groups that the school is looking at? And where those predicted grades are not leading to where you want to be on the ALPS thermometer, what do you need to do? And that's the crucial bit, because the third question is which students do you need to focus on between now and the next data point. There are lots of resources available, so please do make use of the knowledge base and the ALPS Champions resources. When we publish papers, they will pop up in this news section, so do get used to looking at this homepage. I know it's very tempting to get to it and straight away click on the bit you want to go on to. The ALPS Champions quality cycle is really setting out our plans for how we can support you during the academic year. So we're sort of at this point here at the moment where we're trying to decide where we've got to with our current students, and again we would normally be hitting the ground running much more quickly at the beginning of September with a monitoring point 0 in normal times. But it's really thinking about what the priorities are that follow on as these year groups are moving from year 10 and year 12 into sort of year 11 and year 13. A bit of a simplified version right now is the priority now is knowing where you are, knowing what your key priorities are in terms of your actions going forwards, and building on those plans for your next interim monitoring point. So it helps, doesn't give you any answers, unfortunately, but it does allow you to ask all the questions. It's really important to see your data from different directions and be able to focus on where you feel the resources need to be put in place. So in terms of next steps, I like 3 questions. Any more than 3, and that becomes too much. So as we're beginning to define these action points, so that your heads of departments, your faculty leaders, your classroom teachers, whatever level you're working at, need to come up with action points between now and the next managing point. It's being really clear about who has ownership of these, and therefore what resources does the leadership team need to consider? Are there any implications around teaching and learning and structures? What is working in some departments? Can that be transferred to other departments? And crucially, how the impact will be assessed. So if we want to have moved on from where we currently are now, just coming up to October half term, to where we're going to be at our next assessment point, which may well be January mocks, it may be a little bit later than that this year, we need to be able to assess that, and you'll be able to then put the next set of predicted grades into Connect and be able to compare them back to this current monitoring point. So as I said, there are lots of resources for the champions available for you to have a look at. And I think the most important thing to finish on is why we're doing this. And this is all about making sure that our students, meet their expectations, are in a position at the end of year 13 to go on to the next stage in their lives, be it apprenticeships or university or employment. But it's about making sure that we're getting the very much best out of all of our students. So thank you for watching this video. Our contact details are there again at the end. If you do have any questions, please do get in touch with us. Thank you very much.